So this morning we're wrapping up this series called The Search for Happy, and we've been looking at Paul's letter to the church at Philippi. This letter where the major theme that just keeps coming up over and over and over is joy. And today we're going to look at one last idea about joy, and it comes from a verse that's super easy as you're reading the book of Philippians to just sort of skip over. It's from the second chapter, of Philippians, and here's what Paul says. He says, "Do everything without grumbling or arguing." How's that going for everybody? And before we skip over that, let's reflect on that a little bit. Do everything, he says, without grumbling. Let's start with the word everything. Do you think that Paul really meant that? Really? Do everything without grumbling? Could he have been serious? Did he really think that through? Or is he just he didn't know what else to say for a minute, so he just filling space on the page? Just think about one day, because we live one day at a time. What would it be like to live a grumble-free day? What if you declared, just throwing it out there, what if you declared tomorrow a no-complaint day? Are you all getting excited for this so far? Are you so glad you came today? Let's think about it. What would that even look like? Well, tomorrow, when the alarm goes off, and you have to climb out of your warm bed, no grumbling. Could we all agree with that? Okay, that's how it would start. We'd all agree that we'd want to start with that. And then when you look at the first person you see tomorrow, no grumbling. When you look in the mirror, no matter how bad it looks, no grumbling. When you get in the car, whatever the drive is like, or if you get on the bus, if you don't have a car, or you walk, or when you get to work, or just all day, if you're at school, or you're at your desk at school, or when you're at home, or when you eat, whatever it is you eat. When you get on a scale, whatever numbers you're looking at. When you face a rude or critical person tomorrow. When things don't go the way that you want. When your cell phone coverage is spotty. When you can't find the remote control, probably because the kids lost it. Here's the challenge. Paul says, do everything without grumbling. And so what if, tomorrow you committed to a grumble-free day? And the truth is, we can sort of envision that, but I honestly don't think we can really even imagine what that would be like. In fact, I think as we read through something like this, we have some pushback even. We ask questions like, aren't I allowed to get frustrated? Isn't it right to complain and grumble about certain things? And is grumbling even a big deal, really? Honestly, some of you are sitting here, I know you are, and you're sitting here thinking, you're like, dude, really? The focus of a whole dang message is do everything without grumbling? And you're just going, well, this is so shallow and this is so superficial. And I just want to say, hold on a minute, let's think this through. Now, we've thought about the word everything. Let's think about the word grumble. What does it even mean to grumble? So let's talk about grumbling for a minute. What is grumbling about? Well, it doesn't mean that you don't confront or admonish. Now, that can be done out of love, and very often there's injustice. Stuff needs to get corrected. It needs to get addressed. We have to do that. So grumbling is definitely not the same thing as confronting. And it's actually okay to feel frustrated. Certainly, if you read the Gospels, there were all kinds of things that frustrated Jesus, and yet he expressed his frustration at times, and it wasn't grumbling. So what is grumbling? Well, grumbling is born out of a heart of ingratitude, a heart that ignores the blessings of God in my life. And it turns out, and this is interesting, it turns out that God actually takes that very seriously. In fact, in the Bible, in the Old Testament book of Numbers, which I know many of you were reading this last week, 11 different times it tells us that the people of Israel, who had been delivered from slavery by God, were guilty of grumbling. Instead of being grateful to God because he had freed them from 400 years, for crying out loud, of oppression and injustice and slavery, they grumble about not getting the food that they want, not getting the comfort that they want. And it turns out their complaining was really a big deal to God. See, grumbling stems from a heart of ingratitude. And the effects of grumbling are actually a big deal. Grumbling chokes the heart, it clouds my vision, and it cuts me off from joy. And then inside of a little community, grumbling is toxic. Okay, think about it. In a marriage, or in a friendship, or in a family, or on a team, or in a workplace, or in a church, or at a life group. It's like relational cancer. It's contagious, and it damages little communities. So when Paul says, do everything without grumbling and complaining, this is important. He does not mean, okay, and this is super important that we understand this, he does not mean go through life with a chronically negative, complaining spirit. Just don't talk about it. Like, just don't verbalize it. Just bottle that all up inside, okay? He's not saying that. The only way to do everything without grumbling on the outside is that on the inside, you're actually developing a grateful heart. And so, of course, the million-dollar question when it comes to this is, what causes my heart to become grateful? Like, how do I learn to operate from a grateful center? And here's the problem that we all seem to have when it comes to gratitude. We tend to think, I will be grateful to the extent that I receive things in my life to be grateful about. The more good things I have, then the more grateful I'll become. And we naturally think of it like this, like of course, that's the only way to think of it, right? Like, gratitude is a product of my circumstances. So if God wants me to be grateful, then God should just give me more and more and more things to be grateful about. If I just always got my wishes gratified and my desires fulfilled, okay, then I would obviously always be grateful. Now, if you're a parent, did you ever try to raise a child by that formula? Honey, I want you to be grateful. So I'm going to make sure to gratify every desire you ever have. You just let me know, and I'll make sure to get you everything your little heart wants. What do we call a child that's raised that way? Spoiled. Spoiled. And if it's bad, we call it spoiled rotten. Oh. Which is such an interesting idea, isn't it? Spoiled, like food gone bad. Like just good for nothing, spoiled, rotting on the inside. You think about it, what are the main traits of a spoiled child? Is it like extreme humility and gratefulness, like someone that always thinks of others first? Yeah, no. It's more like selfishness and entitlement and ingratitude. See, it turns out that increased gratification doesn't automatically produce increased gratitude. And that's the constant mistake we make. I know what will fix this for me. And it turns out that usually it works the other way around, in fact. And Paul goes on to say, do everything without complaining or arguing, so that you may become blameless and pure, children of God without fault in a crooked and depraved generation, in which you shine like stars in the universe. And this is kind of interesting. Paul is actually linking a lack of grumbling with shining like stars in a depraved generation. Okay, in other words, people that refuse to grumble, people that don't behave as if they're entitled, people that live with humility and thankfulness are pretty rare. In a world of ongoing just negativity, of constant grumbling, Paul says they actually shine. Some of you work in workplaces that there's just constant grumbling, right? So many of you, just constant grumbling. And you know what I'm talking about. People are walking around and they're just looking for the next thing to complain about. And you're like, hey, how's it going, man? And the guy's like, oh, you know, living the dream. Just another day in paradise. And he's like, wow, is that guy having a bad day? It's like, no, he's like that every day. It's just his go-to disposition. And it's interesting because it's contagious, right? I mean, it can become the pervading culture. A workplace can become defined by this constant negativity, and so can a family, and so can a team, and so can a marriage. And guys, when you're living in that environment, it sucks. Like this culture of negativity, it just makes everything suck. And so Paul says, if you learn to let go of grumbling, to not have grumbling become your go-to thing, in a sense, he says, it will cause you to shine. You will bring hope and positivity, and you'll bring joy where it's absent. Now, I don't know about you. You sort of get the wrong, like if you get the wrong image of this, because, like, I don't know about you, but really fake, like really plasticky people drive me nuts. And you know what I'm talking about. Just like fake smile. There's people that pretend to be interested in you, but aren't. These are people that pretend to be team players, but aren't. These are people that pretend to be happy, but aren't. And there are many like church cultures that are completely built around this kind of thing, and people can feel it, and it destroys authenticity. And it's absolutely not the kind of thing that Jesus had in mind, and it is absolutely not what Paul is prescribing here. But we've all also been around people that actually live with real gratitude. They've been through really hard things, and yet they don't complain. And it's not that they're angry and they're just sort of biting their lip and pretending to be nice. It's not that they're sad people pretending to be happy. It's just that they seem to have a genuine love of life. And it's not because they have everything they want. Very often it's in spite of it. And you know those people, and it's inspiring, and it's uplifting, and it's humble. And we love to be around them. And so the question is, like, how do you move toward that? How do you and I learn to live with greater gratitude? Well, clearly gratitude is not a matter of the circumstances I inhabit. It's a matter of the person I become. It's not about the stuff that I get. It's about the character that I develop. And Paul goes on to describe how this works. Toward the end of his letter to the church in Philippi, he says in the last chapter to them, he says, I rejoice greatly in the Lord that at last you have renewed your concern for me. Now, what he's referring to is that the Philippians had sent Paul financial support, like this care package and financial support to help him. And he wanted them to know how grateful he was. In fact, the whole book of Philippians is basically one big thank you note. If your parents ever taught you how important it is to write a thank you note, we would not have one of the greatest pieces of human literature if Paul didn't write thank you notes. But Paul is going to make his thank you note into this, like more than that, he's going to make it into a teachable moment. He doesn't want them to misunderstand where his gratitude comes from. So talking about his gratitude for the gift and the support that they had sent him, he says, I'm not saying this because I am in need, for I have learned to be content whatever the circumstances. I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I've learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. And then comes this very well-known verse. I can do everything, okay? I can face any situation through him who gives me strength. In other words, Paul says, contentment or gratitude is not something I experience if I get enough of what I want. If I get enough gratification, if my circumstances go well enough. Contentment is actually a learned skill. It's an acquired mindset. I have learned the secret of being content, Paul says. And this brings us to one of the great paradoxes of gratitude. Very often, and if you've noticed this, very often it's the people who've had the least, okay, who've been in circumstances of great want or great need, who experience gratitude the most. Very often, people who have the most, okay, succeed the most, get the most, earn the most, own the most, are actually the least grateful. Now, it doesn't make sense when you look at the size of all that they have to be grateful for. And so, why does this go on? A guy named Sean Aker is a leading researcher from Harvard in this whole field of happiness studies. And he tells about one time he'd been studying and teaching on happiness at Harvard, and he was invited to South Africa, to the township of Soweto in South Africa, to present his findings. And so he went to the school in Soweto. And when he got there, it was shockingly impoverished. And he wasn't really prepared for that. There was no electricity, virtually no running water. It was desperate, like abject poverty everywhere. And for those of you that have ever been to a place like that, and I know many of you have, you know it's a different world. And it occurred to him that telling the students about Harvard, telling stories about Harvard and, elite Harvard students and their lives might not connect much with these super deprived students in Soweto. So he decided to bond with them over something universal. He figured this is universal. The dislike students have of homework. They have schoolwork. So he started his presentation with kind of a rhetorical question. He said, how many of you like to do schoolwork? And he said immediately, 95% of them raised their hands and just like beamed. And they were just like, yeah, isn't it cool that we get to do that? And he realized that what Harvard students, okay, the elite, the best of the best, the brightest of a generation, the cream of the crop, those with every advantage and every opportunity, what they experience as a stressor and as a burden to bear, this, oh, poor me. I have to write these papers. I have to read these books and take these tests. I'm living in all this demand and all this pressure. Oh. Like these other students who have infinitely less, who don't even have enough food, who don't really even know that they're going to be able to grow up, they experience the opportunity to learn as an incredible gift. They're like, man, I get to read. I get to discover. I get to find out. I get to learn. I get to write papers. I get to be tested to figure out what I know. I will have doors open to me because of this opportunity that my mom or my dad never had. And they're just like, oh man, who likes homework? Who likes schoolwork? Who likes being involved in school? Me. I'm so thankful for it. Now you think about that. Both groups are asked the same question in kind of a similar situation. How do you feel about schoolwork? One grumbles, and one says, man, I'm so grateful. So grateful. And you can see this with really just about anything. When we first started Brookview at the old Linwood High School, we didn't have any chairs of our own. We couldn't afford that. And so we just used the chairs from the school. So Linwood school colors, as many of you have picked up, are black and gold. So we used these like gold plastic chairs. There we are. That's like the second service ever at Brookview, by the way. And so we have a couple more. Johnny, will you? Yeah, there's the people in them. And see if you recognize these guys. There's one more. How about that? Kate's got her broken arm. She fell off the monkey bars. But about a year or so after that, I was talking with a pastor friend from Snohomish, and his church was getting new chairs. So they offered us their old chairs. And man, they were an upgrade. Johnny, do we have? Yeah, oh, look at those bad boys, huh? They had like, look at that. No, oh, yeah. They had like fabric on them. They had like fabric on them. And like very minimal, but there was some padding in there. And you say, and what was cool was they weren't hard and they weren't plastic, and they weren't bright gold. They were, they just blended right in and looked so attractive. And so we got those things, and man, we were so excited. And seriously, the first Sunday that we had those, we had people sit down, and there was like a standing ovation for the chairs. So the next week I called my friend back, and I just thanked him, and I told him how excited and how thankful we were, and he just laughed. He just laughed, and he said, that's funny. He said, because our new chairs, he said, they're like kind of over the top nice, and they're cushy, and he said, we have this guy in our church that's kind of grumpy about everything. And when he saw the old chairs after we had gotten the new ones, he said, the guy said, if I never have to sit in one of these horrible old chairs again, it'll be too soon. So he said, I'm glad you guys like them. We didn't really have the same affection for them. Same chairs, different responses, right? One group is extremely grateful, the other group isn't at all. And by the way, a few years after that, a church in Arlington got new chairs, and they gave us the ones that you guys are sitting in. So, man, yeah. Are these not the finest chairs on the face of the earth? Okay, now, so here's my point. Our perspective completely and totally dictates our level of gratitude. Why can two people sit in the same circumstances, okay, the same chairs, or the same job, or the same school, and one of them is filled with gratitude and the other one is filled with grumbling? I'll tell you why. It's because what some people perceive as a right, other people see as a gift. See, gratitude always involves humility. Entitlement is what kills gratitude. And that's why we have more, really, than anybody's ever had. And yet we're less grateful for it, really, than anybody's ever been. You think about our culture in general. And this is how it works. When I get it the first time, I'm grateful. When I get it the second time, I start to kind of take it for granted. When I get it the third time, I start to feel like I'm entitled to it. And I get mad and I feel like my rights have been violated if somehow I don't get it. And one of the amazing stories about gratitude in the Bible is in the Gospel of Luke. 10 lepers see Jesus and they cry out from a distance. You know, they have no life. They're dying and they're separated. They're in quarantine. And they see Jesus and they cry out, "Have mercy. Have mercy." And it says, when he saw them, he said, "Go show yourselves to the priests." And as they went, they were cleansed. One of them, when he saw he was healed, came back praising God in a loud voice. He threw himself at Jesus' feet and thanked him, and he was a Samaritan. And Jesus asked, "Were not all 10 cleansed? Where are the other 9? Was no one found to return and give praise to God except this foreigner?" Then he said to him, "Rise and go. Your faith has made you well." Now, I'll tell you what. I will guarantee you, if you stopped any of the other 9 guys after they were given their life back, after they were healed, cleansed of their leprosy so that they could rejoin their families and pick up their life and live again, if you stopped them and asked, are you grateful for what just happened to you? I'll guarantee you that they would all say, "Are you kidding? Of course I am. Of course I feel grateful." But only one of them turned around. Only one of them took the time to come back. And not just come back, but to actually throw himself at Jesus' feet and say, "Oh, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, Lord Jesus, thank you." There's a huge difference between feeling gratitude and expressing gratitude. And this is one of the reasons why nobody thinks they're guilty of ingratitude. I mean, if I just said, okay, how many of you are just really horrible, just horrible, you just suffer from ingratitude? Very unlikely that any of you would raise your hands. When we make a list of our shortcomings, we're aware of certain things. We might say, well, sometimes I lie and sometimes I cheat and there's lust and, that kind of stuff. But we recognize those things in ourselves. Nobody seems to think of themselves as ungrateful. See, if somebody comes to me and says, "You're ungrateful," then what I do is I think about all the times that I have felt grateful. All the times that something good has happened to me in my life and I've felt gratitude. And I think to myself, no way, man. You don't know me. I felt gratitude a lot of times. I don't go around like blabbing about it all the time, but I feel gratitude all the time. And here's the problem. Andy Stanley put it like this. He said, the problem is that people in your life experience unexpressed gratitude as ingratitude. People around you, especially in marriages or in family situations, like your spouse or your friend does you a favor, they fix you a meal or run an errand, or, and if somebody asks you about it, you say, well, of course I feel grateful. But when you don't say, I feel grateful, what the other person experiences is actually ingratitude. 10 guys are healed. 1 guy comes back, and he's a Samaritan. Okay, now that's not a pointless detail in the story. See, the Samaritan feels more than the rest of the guys, I didn't deserve this. Like, I had no right to it. Why? Because Jews and Samaritans hated each other. A Samaritan would never expect a Jew, a Jewish rabbi like Jesus, to do something kind on his behalf. So he's thinking, okay, by all rights, Jesus, Jesus would have just spit in my face, but Jesus, you didn't. You healed me as if I was one of your own. I can't just like keep going with my life. I have to stop now. I have to go back. I can't let another moment go by because this is so overwhelming to me. And he's just like, falls on he's just like, thank you, Jesus, thank you. 10 men are healed, one guy comes back. And here's the real simple question. Are you going to be like the 9 who just keep going, or are you going to be the kind of person who comes back? He says, really, thank you. Okay, I have to thank you. It turns out that the best way to experience more gratitude is to begin to express more gratitude. And we can do that at any moment with God. Just God, I thank you for waking me up this morning like alive. Thank you that when I got out of bed, there was food in my kitchen. I have a kitchen, and there's food in it. That I have clothes in my closet. That there's like water when I turned on the faucet came out. Thank you that my body still like mostly works. Thank you for the amazing beauty of the Northwest. Thank you that I live near Seattle, the greatest city on earth. Thank you for the Seahawks. That even though they started 0-2, even though their offense has been in total hibernation, thank you that we still have the Legion of Boom. Thank you that Bam Bam Cam is back. Or some of you, to get a little bit more serious and kind of specific, you think about what your life could be. Things have gone a little differently. And you would just say, thank you, God, for doctors, for nurses, and for medical technology. Or more generally, most all of us can say, God, thank you for teachers who taught me, and farmers who grow stuff, and people who create things. Thank you for musicians that write stuff and perform stuff, and artists. Thank you for the church and a Bible I can learn from. Thank you for the Spirit who guides me. Thank you for the cross that frees me. Thank you for the work that I get to do that has meaning. Thank you that when my last day comes and my eyes close, Jesus will be with me, and my real life will be just beginning. Thank you that I have a hope that I don't deserve, that I didn't think up or do anything to earn. See, gratitude flows when I start to see every moment, like every beat of my heart, every breath, as a gift. This is how I learned to do everything without grumbling. And it isn't just about praising God. That's a big part of it. But remember how Paul starts this letter to the Philippians, for those of you that have been around as we've talked about this. He says, I thank my God every time I remember you. Talking about the Philippians. And think about who are the people that God is calling you to thank. Like if your parents are still around, maybe you need to thank them. When this service is done, when you get in your car, if you're married, guys, look her in the eye, touch her on the arm, and tell her, sweetheart, thank you. Sweetheart, thank you for, and then you can just fill in the blank. And you just fill that out however you need to. Now, maybe you're sitting here and you're thinking, well, I have to wait to do that, because if I do it today, she'll say, you're only doing it because it was in the sermon. But if I wait, then she'll think it was my idea. I just say, yeah, okay. Whatever you need to do, man. Or maybe you think of a mentor or a friend or a teacher, or maybe somebody that you've kind of traveled through a tough season with, and they've kind of carried you. And maybe you think about that person and you feel grateful, but when you think, have you expressed that? Maybe you want to write a letter. Maybe tell the person how your life is different because of them, how their kindness has affected you. See, if you want to experience more gratitude, the way to start is by expressing more gratitude. I was thinking this week about the importance of regular worship, something that for 2,000 years, Christians that gathered together say this is going to be an important part of our experience together. We're going to worship regularly. I think about the importance of designating regular time. In James, we're told this. James says, don't be deceived, my dear brothers and sisters. Every good and perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of the heavenly lights. In other words, any good thing that you're experiencing in your life in any way can be attributed directly back to a Father in heaven who loves you. Thursday night this last week, I took Brooklyn to the YMCA. So Jen and the older kids were at youth group, and Brooke, my 8-year-old, the back rubber, she and I left. We got out of the house. It was crazy with all these teenagers everywhere. So we got out of the house. We went to play some basketball. And if you're wondering, we're Huguenots, and so basketball is what we do. And thankfully, she happens to love it. And so, in fact, as we were leaving the Y, she ran over to me. It was kind of unexpected. She just ran over to me and like grabbed onto my leg and hugged me and said, "Thanks, Dad. You're like the best dad in the world." And actually, she said, that's close to what she said. We have this little thing that we do, she and I tell her, I'll just tell her like at bedtime and stuff, I'll tell her that she's my favoriteest Brooklyn. And she's like, "Dad, I'm the only Brooklyn you know." And so I'll say, "Well, I know some other Brooklyns, but you're my favorite." And so she says, "Well, you're my favoriteest daddy." And so that's totally cheesy, and it's totally stupid. I get it. But at the end of our time at the Y, she ran over, and she was like totally unprompted by me this time. She just grabbed onto my leg, and she said, "You're my favoriteest daddy in the world." And she hugged me like really hard, like squeezing the blood out of my leg. And I'll tell you something, and this is just a secret between us, I liked it. And, it was just basketball. It was just 1 hour at the Y. It was just some drills and then a couple of games of pig. And I didn't even let her win. Actually crushed her twice because it's good for her soul. But for some reason, as we were leaving, she just felt like this wave of overwhelming gratitude. And so she ran over, she hugged my leg, and she said, "Thank you. Like, you're the best, greatest, daddy in the world." And she didn't, like, feel entitled. She just felt grateful. And I can tell you, it was really nice for me. Now, when I think about all that God has given me, and when I think about how just absurdly blessed I am, like, honestly, how can I feel entitled to anything? Like, what God has given me, what has God given me that I've earned? What has God given me that I deserve? And the truth is, all of it is a gift. And it's not just like, okay, this is where our theology matters. It's not just like a gift from, Mother Universe. It's a gift from our Father in heaven. This is a gift from my Father in heaven because he's kind to me. Like, my health is a gift, and my wife is a gift, and my kids are a gift, and my car is a gift, and my house is a gift, and my clothes are a gift. This church is a gift. My friends, the ones that I've had all throughout my life, different ones at different times, have all been a gift, every one of them. Okay, the forgiveness that I'm living in is a gift. Like, how many times have I run from God, like gone to the far country because I just want to do things my way, and yet every time when I decide to turn around and come home, God sees me in the distance and he runs to me. And his grace and his love, all of that is a gift. My education is a gift. Every opportunity I've ever had has been a gift. The fact that I live in this time, in this place, in a land of freedom, like in the land of opportunity, it's just a pure gift. I'm not entitled to any of it. I'm entitled to nothing. Now, I can live in such a way that I'm only praising God when he gives me everything I want. Or I can learn to live and begin to live praising God in every moment from a place of gratitude. Because every single good thing that I have is more than I deserve. And I'll just tell you what I have discovered. This is from my own experience. Joy comes most when I stop living like an entitled, spoiled little brat. I can choose to live life grumbling about everything, and some days I do. But honestly, there's no joy in it. There's no joy in it for me or for anybody else. So why would I want that? Why would I want that even a little bit? Paul knew joy. Here was a man who knew joy. He knew it even in a prison cell. This letter of immense gratitude was penned by a man that understood joy. And you and I are now being invited into that same joy. And it's a joy that comes from seeing everything as a gift. And it's a joy that somehow is made complete when we praise the giver.